has been a dream for me to be serving in Africa for a long time. I found an administration which is well committed towards certain goals which they have set. A lot of achievements in our bilateral engagement. Engaging with Indian companies as well as the Indian professionals is the most workable solution in the Nigerian context.
Thank you very much, Ambassador B.N. Reddy, Indian High Commission to Nigeria, for speaking to Roots TV Nigeria. Let's start by you describing your stay in Nigeria so far. How has it been?
Well, Mr. Imo, first of all, allow me to convey my gratitude to the Roots TV Nigeria for having me on your show. And well, it's been over 2.5 years of my stay in Nigeria. It has been a very productive and substantive engagement that I've been able to see during this 2.5 years of our India-Nigeria bilateral relations.
Well, sir, you joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1993, and you have served in various missions. How can you compare those missions to now that you are in Nigeria?
Well, to begin with, this is my first assignment as a we call head of mission or a high commissioner.
Okay.
Prior to this, I was assuming roles which were largely in various other capacities.
Okay.
So to that extent, Nigeria becomes a very memorable assignment in my own professional career. And more importantly, this is first time I'm having to serve in Africa.
Wow.
It has been a dream for me to be serving in Africa for a long time.
Wow.
I think
And you happen to be Nigeria.
I happen to be Nigeria and have been introduced to Nigeria in many ways,
Okay.
much before. Way back in 2006-07, when I was serving serving for an Indian mission to the United Nations. I was very fortunate to have been serving with some of my senior colleagues who would very often quote the Nigerian authors in their speeches to the United Nations, like Chinua Achebe and Wole Soyinkas of your great. So it has been an inspirational thing since then to be in Nigeria and to be part of a story which we can write.
Well, you came in right when this current administration picked up, 2016. I know out there you must have seen previous government and you may have ratings for them. But how would you describe this current administration being run by President Muhammadu Buhari?
Well, I would not wish to make a comparative statement here,
Okay.
but what I can certainly say is as I came in, I found an administration which is well committed towards certain goals which they have set out in achieving security, peace and security in the country, upliftment of the economic system, and of course to provide to root out corruption from the country. And I think these are goals which are largely to a large extent also resonates back home in India. Okay. Our leadership also has a very similar objectives in taking forward some of the very difficult problems that persist. So in Nigeria, I think we have seen some remarkable policy directions that have been given in this period. One of them I'd like to stress upon is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP.
Yeah.
Because in fact, ever since this document has been pronounced, our activities, High Commission's activities in Nigeria, have been largely reoriented to match with what has been expected through ERGP, which is essentially a national document. Yeah. National goals have been set out. So our objective was to align our activities with those goals so that we are able to contribute in our own little way in realization of those objectives.
Well, Your Excellency, the Nigeria and India have both enjoyed 60 years of bilateral relationship. How would you describe that?
Well, I think 60 years is certainly not a very long period in any engagement, ideally.
Okay.
But in my view, that during the last 60 years, there has been quite a lot of achievements in our bilateral engagement. The very fact that India established a diplomatic house 2 years prior to independence of Nigeria itself will gives you a kind of a lead to understand how the leadership of India uh, during early stages of Nigeria's independence was committed to establish a relationship. And it is not surprising that that particular period we've had. Let me give one or two examples so that to amplify my point. First, for example, in 1961, we had the visit of His Excellency the first Prime Minister of Nigeria to India, Sir Tafawa Balewa Boubacar, and followed in 1962 by the visit of the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. I think it is this connect which has been made at the very early stages of our relationship, provided strong foundations, and this manifested in its form in diverse sectors of our engagement, whether it is people-to-people contacts, to engagement at the political level, which is already there, economic, and also in the defense sector. So these strong foundations which have been laid have today, if you look back in the last 60 years, to let me give some more indicators as where we stand today, then we'll be able to see how we move forward. One is, of course, because these days in the age of 21st century, relationships are measured how much of economic diplomacy you are able to conduct in the countries, and some of the indicators are how the trade, investments, and others. If you take those indicators, India now is the largest trading partner of Nigeria, for Nigeria globally, and similarly for India, Nigeria is the largest trading partner within the African continent, which is what we have a bilateral statistics of about almost $12 billion US dollars recorded between April 2017 to March 2018. So this is one indicator, and with an investment of over $10 billion over the years, I think India is ranked among the top investors in the country. Then we have a large presence of the Indian companies based here in diverse range of activities. Then we have perhaps the largest presence of Indian diaspora in West Africa, numbering about 50,000 people. So to sum up, I think we are seeing the true manifestation of a civilizational link that exists between India and Nigeria. It is not a one-off relationship. It is a relationship which truly set up on a strong foundation, and the purpose and objectives are very clear, so that the benefits of our engagement goes down to the people of our two countries.
Well, you talked about disconnect when both prime ministers visited each country. What was that thing that caused a disconnect?
Well, I have not said any disconnect. I said the connect was well established at that point in time. In a sense that, as you could realize that soon after independence, the political leadership of our two countries was able to see eye to eye, and both countries coming out of colonial baggage, and our pace of development of relationships naturally ought to be slow, because we both are trying to rely entirely on our own understandings of other developing countries, which is one of the reasons why the initial phases of engagement of Nigeria with India was very intense. In fact, it is these visits which eventually led to an understanding, and a number of Indian professionals, these medical, academic, some of them who are working for various technical areas, they came to Nigeria at the invitation of the Nigerian government. And in fact, today, if I speak to any number of very sort of people who are in the early 50s or late 40s, and who are in prominent positions, or otherwise, they would invariably talk of the presence, the impact that the Indian teachers made in their own lives, which I found, which is like, we had true ambassadors of India at very, very sort of areas, at places where people were really connecting with each other.
Okay. Well, you talked about the visit of the Prime Minister. We've not seen the current Prime Minister make any visit to Nigeria. We've had several presidents come to Nigeria. Are we expecting him anytime soon here in Nigeria?
Well, I think both countries are having substantive political engagement. For example, our Prime Minister, our Vice President, visited Nigeria in September 2016,
Okay.
and year before that, we had the visit of His Excellency the President of Nigeria to India
Okay.
to attend the India Africa Forum Summit, third edition of it. And there are certainly dialogue going on for having high level visits between our two countries.
Okay.
And I'm very sure that what you mentioned about the visit of Indian leaders coming here more. In fact, last October, last month only, we had a visit of two of our ministers of state for external affairs and commerce. So the political engagement is there. Yes, I agree that we have to target for higher
Yeah.
level visits in the months to come.
Well, there are over 5,000 Nigerians who go to India on a monthly basis for medicals. How would you describe that?
Well, I think the success of Indian medical industry, particularly providing medical tourism, is a very recent phenomenon. It's a phenomena which is, I think, a decade or a little over that. We are very happy with the way in which the Indian private sector brought in professionalism into the medical sector, which has helped in establishment of a number of world-class hospital chains, providing tertiary care to a number of things. In fact, it is not surprising that a large number of Nigerians would want to go to India for treatment because they get top-class medical treatment at affordable cost. And it is not surprising either that a number of Europeans go to India for medical tourism because, for example, I understand that many from UK visit India for medical tourism for whatever reasons. Again, it's coming out of the quality of medical treatment that is made available at affordable cost. I think is at the root of all this development. Yeah.
Well, if I may take you back to the previous answer you provided in terms of the number of companies you have in Nigeria, I know there are well over 135, and we've had 60 years of bilateral relationship. What would you say has kept Indians coming to Nigeria to establish more companies and also employing more of Nigerians? What would you say has been the key factor sustaining their relationship?
Well, if I may put it this way, that Indian companies coming into Nigeria started during the British time.
Okay.
The British, having had as they called it, the crowning jewel of the British Empire, which was India, well established, and then they came into Nigeria in the late 1880s. It was natural that a number of Indian companies which were supporting the British at that time, they also came to Nigeria to support the services. So ever since, there has been a significant evolution of Indian participation of Indian companies in Nigeria. Number one, this evolution has been gradual. A number of them initially came as traders, and then some of them came as manufacturers, particularly in textile industries and other ones. And then came a stage where they started looking at investments here. And then now there is, in my view, there's a further evolution into a mix of sort of trade as well as investment oriented approach. And let's not forget that Indian industry now is one of the fastest growing in the world. India is, as you know, is the leading among the emerging economies. Yeah. So the Indian industry has itself evolved significantly for providing quality, affordable, at affordable cost. So thereby, there is a greater desire even among the many Nigerian companies to take support to establish firm contacts with Indian companies. To illustrate this point, for example, the Dangote major refinery project, which is now being established, it is an Indian company, Indian Engineers India Limited, which is the PMC for the whole project. Okay. Number one. A number of Indian companies are engaged in developing this particular thing. It's again coming out of the experience of the Nigerian entrepreneurs that engaging with Indian companies as well as the Indian professionals is the most workable solution in the Nigerian context. And this realization is coming, and I have seen it in the last 2.5 years, it is now moving in from sector to sector, and it is which to me it is not very surprising, simply because another fact should illustrate that for India exports 50% almost of its engineering goods to Europe, which means the quality, the sort of precision and various things are well established, and Indian industry is not going in to make a quick money out of it, and then it is not a, it like to be a more substantive partner wherever they're going, and they're looking at relationships which are not very short term,
Okay.
but which are little medium to long term.
Well, Your Excellency, let's talk about you. How do you juggle family and diplomatic work?
Well, we all live in Abuja. My office is in Abuja, and well, I think you see since my children are studying in India,
Okay.
and of course, Abuja is a very active place, both for professional work as well as in the personal front, because quite apart from official engagements, we have a large Indian community here, increasing at a rapid pace. Number two, we have also have many Nigerian friends, and time is really not in our hands. So I wish we had more than 24 hours in a day. Yeah.
So, what states in Nigeria have you been to?
Well, I've been to, let's say, certainly to Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, then Sokoto, Imo. My only regret is I couldn't travel to the east very often, but I would hopefully, let me see in the coming months we can do that.
Okay, but how would you compare those regions that you've been to?
Well, each of them are very unique in their own ways. Lagos is the financial capital of Nigeria, of course, the heart of economic activities out there, with large presence of Indian companies and Indians living there. We have an Indian school which has 2,000 Indian students.
Wow.
Who are following the Indian curriculum.
So that's quite much.
Quite a lot. But that again is a slightly truncated number, which I understand there were 2,500 students earlier.
Okay.
But they're gradually increasing their numbers because of the brief recession that Nigeria went through. There was a little reduction in the number of Indians who are working out there. Well, going to Kano, to closer to Maiduguri and all these places. I mean, these places, one had read about them quite a lot.
Okay.
They have been the arteries of African trade, if you have to use the word, particularly Maiduguri, Kano, and you can still see them. Of course, there are challenges now in terms of travel by road, but Kano is very unique in its own appeal, being the sort of political capital of northern Nigeria, as one has learned it. And we have a large Indian presence out there, and who have been there for last 5 decades or so. So when we travel to these places, we are able to connect with the leadership as well as with our community. And I think, I wish I had more time to travel.
We hope so.
Yes.
What about food? Which of them would you say you love most?
Well, being a non-veg, I'm a vegetarian, which actually restricts my own ability to taste a large amount of Nigerian cuisine. Yeah. But we have had occasions to try a number of, sort of vegetarian recipes of Indian kind, with the help of chefs who would make with yam some soups. Then you have soups coming out of cassava oriented. So I think it's been a good experience.
Well, sir. So what sector of Nigeria do you think the federal government needs to work on? I mean, haven't been here 2.5 years.
Well, I think the emphasis that has been given now, as I said, I was referring earlier to the ERGP document. We are very happy to note that there is a renewed focus on agriculture, for example, establishment of industries here, quite apart from various other factors. Now, agriculture is one sector where India has much to contribute to Nigeria. It is simply because India has learned its own lessons in the late 1970s and early 1980s from a country which is an importer of agricultural products. We are now not only feeding 1.3 billion people in our country, but are also able to export some of the agricultural products to the other countries. Yeah. This all happened because of what we call as the green revolution that has taken place in the mid 1980s and that. And later on, we also had a white revolution, which is dairy industry, which has blossomed, and many other agriculture-related sectors. So it is here, I think, now we are trying to pay a lot of attention, simply because by the admission of the Nigerian authorities,
Okay.
over 60% of the land is arable but not being cultivated, number one. Number two, you also have huge potential of developing this field. And if one were to take the statistics of 1960s,
Okay.
Nigeria was way ahead of countries like China and India in agriculture. But I'm sure with the new determination that has come out starting with 2015-16 particularly, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time that Nigeria will not only become self-sufficient. And this is where our partnership, India's partnership is. We have been able to train over about 150 of the Nigerian government officials in the agricultural ministries, as well as some of the sort of experts who are in the field in various agricultural sectors in India. And quite apart from that, we have organized special events, how our two countries can collaborate in the field of agriculture. Because believe me, I think if you cross this hump, Nigeria would certainly be much better placed in its own development of its own economic environment. So this is one area, and the second is, of course, we're going to talk about some of the emerging advanced sectors of science and technology.
Yeah.
We have started an engagement in the field of space science and technology, for example. I'm happy to say that very soon the space agencies of India and Nigeria will be signing agreements, memorandum of understandings, so that, as you can see, that if you start utilizing these modern technologies more into very crucial areas such as agriculture and other related sectors, you would not only do them better but also more efficiently and in a more optimal manner. For example, there is what is called as the remote sensing technology we talk about, and which is where India has made rapid strides. It is developing well in Nigeria, but yes, they need to take some lessons from countries which have done well in this sector, and I think India can offer a good avenue in this area.
Well, sir, just before we go, would you say that your coming to Nigeria, like you told us in the intro, you had always wanted to come to Africa, and it happens to be Nigeria? Would you say your dream coming to Africa had been fulfilled being in Nigeria?
Yes, certainly. I mean, let's not forget that Nigeria, which houses 1/5 of Africa's population, number one, and it is the I call it the sort of, it is the parentage that is given to the African English literature, and the kind of diversity that your country has. So I always felt that it is home away from home, because of such large similarities of existence. I think it is, I must say here, that only those who have experienced diversity in their own environment can appreciate better the diverse cultures from other side, number one. And I think I'm very confident that as we believe this diversity is strength, and I think it is a matter of time that that particular evolution will come in Nigeria. And well, it's a struggle all the time. When you have diverse views, diverse cultures, we need to find ways to bring them together and find most common denominator which can help in the common endeavor towards establishing a better relationship within the country and outside also.
Hi, Commissioner Reddy. Thank you so much for speaking with Root TV Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you.